Which is what the PUD does, the planning development. When I go into a condo, it's confusing everybody. Yeah. And then the meeting, they ask about it, if there's any condo, I did it, I don't know. There's good. Or it's gonna be. What? No. All homes. 110 after the.
Mr. Mayor, it's 7 o'clock if you're ready to get started. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. How is everyone today?
Everybody appears to be fine. You look very festive.
I actually changed out of the really obnoxious sweater that had giant scarecrows and pumpkins. That was my teaching sweater today.
Okay. So just give me 1 second. I'm in my office. Let me go make sure everything's okay in the council chamber, and then we can get started.
Oh, we ain't got our headphones on. Are we ready, Mr. Womack?
Mr. Mayor, he said he needed just a minute to get something in his office or hook something up in his office.
Thank you. Ready, boss? Well, there's a slight delay here while Mr. Womack is getting booted his computer up.
Okay, can everybody see me? There we go. And I just got Miss Powell and Miss Falcon entered into the meeting. I believe we're ready to go.
Okay, at this time, I call the regular meeting of the City of Cedar Springs for October 8th to order. Would you all please rise with me this evening and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for attending this evening. We will do a roll call. Mr. Womack, do we have Miss Atchison on?
Miss Atchison indicated she would be late, but she will attempt to be here. She was working late.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Conley,
Sure.
she's present. Mr. Groves,
Mr. Gross indicated that he had, I believe, a family affair to deal with today and would not be present.
thank you. Mrs. Nixon. We hear anything from Mrs. Nixon?
I see
Yes, I'm
Jeff.
here. I had a technical moment there, but I'm here.
Thank you. Miss Powell. Is present. Mrs. Race is present. Mr. Hall is here. Public comment portion of the meeting. The council welcomes and encourages the public to speak during the public comment of the public hearing portion of the agenda. However, council's policy is to hear the public comment, not to act on the public comment at this time. Concerns brought before the council during the public comment portion of the agenda will be referred to the city manager for action. If, after communication with the city manager, no resolution is reached, the concerns will be elevated to the mayor and eventually to the council for action. Those citizens wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items will be allowed a maximum of 4 minutes each to address their concerns. This is the only time during the council meeting that citizens are allowed to address the council. Please state your name and address for the record if you would like. Mr. Womack, do we have anybody?
So we only really technically have two members of the public that are online, and they are both, I guess, interested parties. So I'll provide them that opportunity. Mr. Vredevelt, even though you get to speak next, do you have a public comment at this time? Mr. Vredevelt, I couldn't hear anything. Do you have a public comment at this time? Looks.
I am here.
Have a public comment before you go through the audit. Mr. Vredevelt, do you have a public comment before you go through the audit with us?
Nope, just the audit.
Okay, so we'll get to you next. And then Mike West, Mr. West, do you have a public comment at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay, those are the only members of the public that were present virtually. Madam Clerk, do we have any members of the public in the council room that would like to make a comment at this time?
There's no one here at this time.
Okay, so I guess that's all the public comments. Mr. Vredevelt, would you like to provide us with your insight regarding the audit, please?
I will do that. Thank you. First, thanks to Darla and her team for making the audit go as smoothly as possible. Once again, we were out there a little while ago and got through everything as she had prepared it, and we're able to put financial statements together, and hopefully everyone has those in front of you. Mike, would you like me to put it up on the screen, or is that not necessary?
You're welcome to, but I don't think it's necessary. All the board members should have their copies in front of them.
Okay, I'll walk through the audit, the booklet a little bit, just a couple pages for you, and then I will put up the presentation that is also showing in the boardroom. I'll put that up.
I was going to say, is it available for people at home to be able to see it in some capacity while we're talking about it?
The audit report?
Yeah.
I can put it up on the,
as we go through it? Like if we were sitting in the room, you usually put it up on the big screen?
Yeah, that's the presentation. Yes, I will have
Okay.
that. Yep, yep. But the written typed out report, I'll just kind of walk through the book. So,
Sure.
okay. So at the end of the audit, we form an opinion on the financial statements, and at the bottom of page 1 of the audit booklet is the opinion. It's a clean, good opinion. It says the financial statements present fairly the financial position of the city. And then in addition to that, we also look at the internal controls over the financial reporting process, and there's a report on the very last page of the booklet that there's no findings of significance there or anything that we had to report there either. So all in all, it's a good, clean audit. The big issues for this year were there was new debt issued for the fire station construction, which was just underway at year end. There were some delays in projects and so forth because of the COVID situation. So that was a little bit delayed in getting started from the original plans. The next several pages are your management discussion and analysis. I won't go through that. And then on page 9 of the 9 through 11 are the government-wide financial statements. These are your full accrual statements. The only thing I wanted to point out was right on the bottom of page 9. You have a positive net position, unrestricted net position, which is a bit unusual in these days and times because of there's many communities that have a negative or deficit there, primarily because of pension and OPEB liabilities that have to be recorded now. So it's in good shape from a government-wide standpoint. And then on pages 12 through 15, these are your more familiar probably to you with the fund basis financial statements. And just a couple things on the bottom of page 12, this is your balance sheet of your governmental funds. And I'm just kind of looking at the general fund, which is the left-hand column. Right at the bottom of the page, you see unassigned fund balance, 987,000. The unassigned portion of fund balance is the amount that's available, and that's about 55% of your annual expenditures and transfers out. So that's a very good, strong fund balance. You do have many items, many set-asides, I'll call them, but assigned and committed fund balances for various upcoming projects and capital things that are set aside. So that's a net of those amounts, and that's very good. And then on page 14 is your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, or your income statement. Only a couple things to point out there. There is a new fund this year. I should have pointed that out on the last one, but it's for the fire station capital project. And it's the middle column of page 14, right near the bottom. You can see the issuance of long-term debt of 3.1 million. So that's the new debt issue that's going to pay for at least the majority of the fire station. And then the transfers out, I had a little note there, but the transfers coming out of the general fund of 248,000 are going into the debt service fund. So that's what the general fund's portion of paying the debt service on the old bonds that are outstanding. But at the end of the day, the bottom line, which is 3 lines up from the bottom, the general fund has a positive 146,000. So that's great. The local streets or major streets, which is the next column, is also positive, and you have a fund balance in there of 630,000. In addition, there's a local streets fund with 249,000. So all in all, the city's very responsible fiscally, and things look very good. The proprietary funds, your water and sewer activities, I'll hit those when I look at the slides a little bit, but they're also in good shape. On page 17, you can see the bottom line there, the change in net position, 3 lines up from the bottom, is 235,000 for sewer, 267 for water. So they're both did well this year and didn't have any surprises or glitches there. If you would turn to page 41, way near the back. This is more detailed information on the general fund. It's the budget to actual report of the expenditures. And overall, you can see that many of the expenditures were way underspent, partially because of the shutdown. So there wasn't the expenses that were anticipated. There were a couple that were overexpended by a very minimal amounts, so those get reported to the state, but the state has a 10% tolerance, so you're okay. They won't send you a letter regarding that. That'll have to be corrected. And then just a couple footnotes to point out. Page 27, footnote number 2, that's your compliance footnote, and that's the budget overages I just mentioned. Pages 28 and 29, excuse me, just the capital assets footnote. You can see on right near the bottom of page 28, there's a line called construction in progress with the current year is $360,000 and total construction in progress is $430,000. So that's the start of the fire station construction in there. And then to point out the long-term debt on page 30. One thing I did want to mention, your new debt that you can see there is at 1.34%. That's an unbelievably low interest rate. So you've locked in that money through 2035 at 1.34%. So nice job on that one. That's about it as far as the book goes. So this is new territory for me. So we'll try to get this presentation up here. Do you see it?
Perfect.
All right. I'm still learning this program, believe it or not.
Aren't we all?
Yeah,
It's a brave new Zooming world.
it is. So this is the first couple slides here are those first couple of financial statements, the government-wide financial statements in your booklet. And this is just a pie chart of where the revenue comes from. It changes a lot from year to year, depending on what kind of grants you get. And last year you had received some grants for self-contained breathing apparatus equipment and some sidewalks. So property tax was a smaller percent and there was a capital grants, which made up a bigger percent. This year capital grants is 0. But property tax makes up a little over half of the total revenue on a government-wide basis. State shared revenue is about 14%. And then the red, the 22% operating grants, that's primarily, most of that is your Act 51 street money. And then the next slide, this is just to show your expense areas matched up with direct revenues. And this too will fluctuate significantly year to year, depending on grants and that kind of thing. This one, the streets one here looks a little bit strange because it actually looks like your revenues exceed your expense. That's true because a lot of what is paid for gets capitalized in the street funds, the infrastructure on the new streets. Other than that, you can kind of see the difference between the expenses and program revenues is what the property tax and state shared revenue pays for. And this is now the next several slides are strictly your general funds. Excuse me. I don't have a cold. So this is, you can see your property taxes are just continuing to steadily increase from year to year. State shared revenue has been increasing. That is a little bit less than even this year because the state did some finagling, I'll call it, with some of the non-constitutional portion of state shared revenue and switched it over to COVID reimbursement. And that wasn't allowed to be recognized in 2020. It has to be recognized in this coming fiscal year. So it's kind of a weird glitch, but that's how the state mandated that. And you'll see there's a big glitch or a big jump right here last year because there was that federal money was received last year that I mentioned. So that just falls in the other category in the general fund here. And this is just a long history of your property tax revenue. And you can see this is a glitch when the TIFA was canceled or closed out, I should say. And now since then, it's just been steadily increasing for the last 6 years. So That's what you want to see as property values go up. That's what this is showing. Okay, and this is the expenditures by function just within the general fund. And the only big unusual item is right here that's that self-contained breathing apparatus that was purchased in the general fund. And yeah, there was some additional transfers there last year, but other than that, it's looking pretty steady from year to year with those few exceptions. And then this is always a number we look at as general fund balance as a percent of expenditures and transfers. I mentioned earlier, the unassigned portion is 55%. This is the total fund balance, and you can see it dips up and down once in a while, and it's about 82%. That's your total fund balance again. And last year it dropped down a little bit because although there was a positive increase, the expenses last year were very high. So it just it fluctuates that way a little bit. Still 83% of total, 55% unassigned. Those are very good, strong indicators. And then the next couple slides are your water and sewer funds, which I mentioned. So this, you can see the sewer funds going, the yellow bar here is your net income for the last 5 years. It's been positive, which is great. The expense does include depreciation, so the depreciation is all being covered. Another thing we have to look at in water and sewer fund is cash flows. And cash flow for both sewer and water fund are also positive. So they're good. And here's your water fund. Back in 2016 made barely anything, and now for the last 4 years has been positive. So everything's from that standpoint, financial indicators are looking good, and keep being conservative in your spending, and we'll keep moving forward. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor. We also did issue a separate letter that was included in your package. There's a couple of items in there that Darla was going to work towards getting fixed. They're very minor, and I don't even remember what they were off the top of my head, but it's
I did see that. I did read that portion, and it's very minimal.
correct. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to address those.
Is there any question to the counselor at this time for our auditors? Hearing none. Good job. Thank you, Darla. Good job, all.
Okay, thank you, Doug. We appreciate it every year.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Great.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on at this time to number 4, public hearing. Mr. Womack, do we have any public hearings?
We do not have any public hearings at this time.
Thank you. Then moving on to item number 5, adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to add 2 items. I believe the clerk has them written down. Madam Clerk, would you mind reading those into, I guess, the record?
I have adding item 8E, an ordinance to amend to the recreational marijuana regulatory ordinance, the first reading. Add item 8F, ordinance amendment to the recreational marijuana zoning ordinance, first reading.
Madam Clerk, do we also
And
have?
then 8G, 8G, Planning Commission members, the number of members on the board.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, I would ask that we add those items to the agenda prior to adoption.
Thank you. What's the will of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I will make a motion to adopt the agenda with those changes.
I would second.
That was Mrs. Nixon was the second. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, a roll call vote. Mrs. Conley,
Yes.
Mrs. Nixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Powell,
Yes.
Mrs. Race. Mrs. Race.
Yes.
Mr. Hall votes yes. Is Miss Atchison available yet, Mr. Womack?
I have not seen her. She did text me and said that she would try to Zoom in as soon as she was done with work.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries. Moving on to consent agenda. Any additions, corrections, or additions or removals from any of the council members?
Not I.
What's the will of the council at this time?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, a roll call vote. Mrs. Conley,
She said yes.
Mrs. Nixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Powell,
Yes.
Mrs. Race.
Yes.
Mr. Hall votes yes, motion carries. Moving on then to action items. Number 7A, Mr. Womack.
So the fire department did budget for this item. They're replacing 2 of their older automatic external defibrillators, which obviously help persons who are having heart problems, heart attacks, arrhythmias. I believe they're going with the second cheapest bidder. The second cheapest does have additional options. It's not a bare bone system like the cheapest was. And I would ask that the council approve that motion. And Mr. Frazier is available on the Zoom call if you'd like to ask him any questions.
Thank you. From what I understand, this Mr. Frazier, Chief, I understand these AEDs you have now are quite old. I'll take that as a yes.
He forgot to unmute himself. There he is.
If you can hear me, yes. The one is 16 years old and the other one is 12. It's getting more difficult to replace the batteries and get the pads and stuff. With this new Zoll, we can reach out to the ambulance provider and we can exchange pads and stuff like that in the field.
Nice.
Thank you, Chief. What's the will of the council?
Let me see. I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of 2 automatic external defibrillators at a cost not to exceed $4,975. I'll second.
Okay, Mrs. Race has seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, have a roll call vote. Mrs. Conley,
Yes.
Mrs. Nixon,
Yes. She said yes.
thank you. Mrs. Powell,
Yes.
Mrs. Race,
Yes.
Mr. Hall votes yes, motion carries. Moving on to item B, Mr. Womack.
Thank you. So we were approached by the Cedar Springs Museum who wanted to enclose one of their porches that they have. I provided you with some pictures showing you kind of what they're planning on doing. I did put this in front of the Planning Commission 2 days ago. They reviewed it. They recommended it with no comment. And the only reason this is even coming to the board, of course, is because this is located on city government property in Morley Park. Otherwise, I would have simply approved it as zoning administrator because it's a minor construction project. So I would ask that the council approve of this zoning application.
I'll make a motion to approve the Cedar Springs Museum zoning application for a storage construction.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Mrs. Ray seconded. Any discussion? The planning commission agreed this is unanimous that they should do this, so. Any further discussion? Have a roll call vote. Mrs. Conley.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Dixon.
Yes.
Ms. Powell.
Yes.
Mrs. Ray.
Yes.
Mayor Patrol votes yes, motion carries. Moving on to item C, Mr. Womack.
Thank you. So as you guys are all aware, it's kind of been a roller coaster week with the state Supreme Court's majority ruling that the governor's executive orders regarding COVID-19 were unconstitutional. Of course, the whole legal community is kind of bumfuzzled about what that all means and what the current state of the law is. So in the intervening 3 or 4 days since that occurred, I drafted, or more likely I modified, the city's current COVID-19 preparedness and response plan, which mostly deals with how City Hall staff act regarding COVID-19. But I did add some additional language regarding the wearing of masks and social distancing inside of public buildings, which would include both City Hall and the library. In the intervening time, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services did put out their own health order requiring the same thing. So there is currently a state law in place. Of course, the Kent County Health Department would also have the authority to do a similar thing as Oakland County and Livingston County have done. But this is an option for City Council to give our local deputies a written policy about how to deal with somebody who refuses to wear a mask or refuses to social distance in city buildings. Now, it's kind of one of those things where, is it necessary? No, probably not. Not at least so long as the Health and Human Services order is upheld. And I'm hoping that the state legislature can get their butts in gear and work with the governor to put something together that would cover the whole state as well. But, you know, right now we have members of the board, we have city staff and employees who are at risk and in the high risk categories for COVID-19. My staff have to deal with dozens and hundreds of people daily and weekly. And we are going to be having a very large, very significant election that occurs at City Hall here not that long from now. So I guess I would ask the City Council to adopt this motion so that we can use our trespassing powers to help keep employees inside public buildings safe.
Thank you. What's the will of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I will make a motion to adopt this policy for safety measures and for policing for COVID-19.
Second.
Mrs. Nixon seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Have a roll call vote. Mrs. Conley.
Yes.
Mrs. Nixon.
Yes.
Ms. Powell.
Yes.
Mrs. Race.
Yes.
Mr. Hall votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on, is there any other business before the city? Before we move into discussion?
No action items, no additional action items at this time.
Thank you. Moving into discussion. Item A, Mr. Womack or Ms. Falcon.
So I'll talk for 2 seconds and then I'll hand it over to Ms. Falcon. So I think it's extremely important for the city council to be aware of how the city is doing. And I think a very easy to understand and important aspect of that is to see how much money is being returned to the fund balance at the end of each year. So in the 4 years that I've been here, we've done fairly well. We have returned money to the fund balance, even though we've reserved some funds over that time. And so I'll let Ms. Falcon discuss I guess the implications, what occurred, whether we have, if she has that information, whether we have any CIP items still outstanding, and I guess the amount. Ms. Falcon.
Okay, so there was a graph in your packet for tonight. Just wanted to go through each fund. In the general fund specifically, this is Mr. Vredeveld mentioned this number as well. So the net for the general fund, we put $146,759 into fund balance. So that was a good thing. Major Street, 68,000 positive went into fund balance. Local streets, on the other hand, though, had to dip into fund balance to the tune of $81,000, but that was planned for. If you remember at the beginning of the year, we wanted to do those 2 large paving projects, and we knew the revenue just for the year wasn't going to be enough. So we did have to dip into fund balance to get those paving projects done. Much needed paving. So I think it was worth it. Then you have rubbish collection. So the 0.5 of a mil did cover our expenses for brush pickup and leaf pickup this year, and we were able to put $15,626 into fund balance. DDA spent almost all of their tax capture for the year. They had a net of $6,861. So in total, they have $21,000 in fund balance. Funds that go into the DDA, they're meant to be spent on DDA projects. So I think the DDA is doing a good job of allocating those tax dollars like it's intended to. The library was able to put $20,204 into fund balance. So they were able to cover all of their operating expenses this year. 2 more numbers that the auditor mentioned just a little bit ago. Sewer fund, positive $235,000, and the water fund, $267,000. Both very good. Our rates are covering our expenses. We're covering depreciation. We're putting a couple dollars in the bank, which I think we need in both funds for upcoming projects. And the equipment fund, last but not least, had to dip into fund balance to the tune of $32,000. We've talked about the equipment fund just about every year. When the equipment that we have is not out on the streets, for example, plowing snow, we've had a couple winters where we're not plowing as much as normal. So the rental from the street funds is not going into the equipment fund, to cover that. But we still have to maintain all the equipment we have. And that's what this is doing, maintaining the equipment we have. So what was the other thing that was part of this?
I don't see anything else.
Yeah, that was the only graph that I had. So we're doing good.
Thank you.
I think.
Any questions of Ms. Falcon on this report? Good job with the audit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darla.
Moving on to item B.
We clearly owe you cookies. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item B, Consumers Energy Assessment Report. Mr. Womack, or
Yep. So we had staff bring in Consumers Energy, a consultant from Consumers Energy, to kind of talk to us about what things we could be doing better at City Hall to be more energy efficient, which also, of course, ends up saving us money. So you can see, I think it's starting on page 26 of your packet. Really, the only significant thing that we weren't already doing was a complete replacement of all of our overhead lights from the former fluorescent tubes to a new LED tubes. Now, the DPW department has been replacing them kind of piecemeal as they burn out. It is a significant amount of work for them to do that. And of course, only when they burn out. So from day to day and year to year, we're still using the fluorescent tubes. So you can see here on page 26, there's an estimated cost of about $4,700 to replace all of the overhead lights with LED. The payback is estimated about 6 years. So I think it's a smart move. I guess I'm only really bringing it to council to ask if we can move ahead with this. Probably put an RFP out to get somebody to come in and do this for us. And once we get an RFP and actual installation costs, we'll bring it back for approval. But I just want to hear if this is something you're interested in doing.
Yeah, I don't see any of that in the council packet for the RFP or the cost, just for the consumer's audit.
Yep, so we don't have the actual RFP out yet. We don't have any bids back yet. We just got this back not that long ago. Didn't have time to put that stuff out there. So just putting it in front of council, seeing if there's any reason we shouldn't do this, I guess. It seems like a no-brainer to me, but yeah, it will cost about $5,000 up front for a 6-year payback.
That would come out of building maintenance. And just as a sub-note, we've had this audit done before, and they've always come back with the same thing as changing out our 4-foot incandescent tubes. Any questions or concerns?
Is it only the tubes that have to be replaced, not anything else?
Well, and so that is part of the reason why it's a little bit complicated and why we'd want to hire an electrical contractor to do it for us. So as I indicated before, Bill and the DPW department have replaced some of our lights with these LEDs, but, and maybe Mr. Hall, you could explain it better. I understand there's some kind of heat sink or something that has to be added to the light to make the LEDs work, which is a significant amount of work. It's a little complicated. So even though Bill can do it to get, 40, 50, 60 lights done in a reasonable period of time, we should probably leave it to professionals. Mr. Hall, could you explain maybe better why or what extra work needs to be done to replace
yes, from what I understand, the balances and the tubes and everything would have to be removed, and possibly the brackets that tubes connect to. And then there's an igniter that goes in there in the wiring to the tubes or the strips. So it's time consuming.
Well, I think it's about time we updated these lights. It's like a spook house in here with these.
Yep, and of course, in updating the lights, a lot of City Hall would be brighter. I think the colors would be, when I was writing the lighting ordinance for the zoning ordinance, I found out all sorts of things about light. So I think it's a smart move. I don't know if Darla has identified where we'd have the 5,000 from, but as we were indicating before, our fund balance is at 55% of our operating budget. Council's policy is 20%. And at some point, instead of squirreling away money, you do have to spend money on amenities and making things better. So I'd recommend that we do this, and without objection, I will start working on this for next month, I guess.
Mayor, do you want a motion? Do you want a straw poll?
Well, I think Mr. Womack, if he hears an objection from any of us, if the majority of us are in favor of it, we'll just go with it. Is that okay, Mr. Womack?
Yeah, I don't think I need a formal motion or even a straw poll, but it seems like a no-brainer. But of course, I always like to have the oversight of my city council, and if anybody can identify any reasons why it's a bad idea, I'd be happy to hear it, and we can take that into consideration. But without objection, I'll move forward.
I think that would be a good idea. Just send an RFP out and get us costs so we know what we're dealing with for next month. Preferably a local electrical contractor if possible. Thank you. Moving on to item C, wastewater treatment plant tour in late October. Mr. Womack.
Yeah, so I talked with Gary, the plant operator, almost a month ago now, probably a day or two after your last meeting. He says, yeah, we spent a lot of money at the plant this year. And of course, I visit the plant on a pretty regular basis. It does. It looks a lot nicer. They have put some paint down on the floors and the ceilings, and they've got a couple of the big impellers fixed and changed out. So Gary, of course, likes visitors, and he asked that the board come out and visit him. So I was hoping to arrange for a get-together tour. Now, at the time, he says late October. He's now saying mid-November, and we identified November 13th as a good date. So I'd like to set that up, and I guess look at your calendars, November 13th at noon. And I guess please let me know if you're able to attend.
Will that be for council or board members only?
Well, I mean, I don't want to invite members of just the general public at this time because there are safety concerns. And we have talked about that in the past, about potentially bringing members of the public out there, but it's a safety issue and safety concern. So at this time, I would say board members, I guess, planning commission members, anyone who's within the sphere of the government would be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I would limit it to city staff and planning commission members if so, and members, any board members. Thank you. November 13th, mark that down.
What time? We got a time yet?
That would be noon.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving on to item D, White Pine Trails neighborhood.
So of course, I've got a great city council who likes to pay attention to what the planning commission is doing. I've also got a great planning commission who works their tails off. For anyone who's not aware, we were, I don't want to say stuck, but we were stuck at City Hall in that meeting until what, about 10:15 or so on Tuesday. Got a ton of work done, obviously with the marijuana stuff in this neighborhood. There's a lot to review, lots to look at, and lots of stuff going on in the city. So Mr. West is with that neighborhood developer, and we can hear from him if you'd like to. The planning commission did make recommendations to the board about possibly accepting this, but being as it was only 2 days ago, I did not feel it was appropriate for action at this time. So we can bring it back on the November agenda for possible passage at that time. But I figured you should look at it now, and Mr. West is available to answer questions, or you could ask him to give a brief presentation if you'd like.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Sure. Any council wishing to ask Mr. West any questions? Ms. Conley, go ahead.
I appreciate all the work that the Planning Commission did, and I like the nature preserve that's part of this structure for the PUD. One of my questions is, we're becoming a trail town and we have a lot of hiking. Will there be any trails through that nature preserve where people can walk?
Yes.
Wonderful.
I have a question. What is the difference between a condominium site and just a housing development?
Mr. West. Are
Good
you still
evening,
here?
Council. Mike West with Westview Capital, Allen Edwin Homes. The question that came up at Planning Commission as well. There's basically two ways to subdivide property in a subdivision type of look. One is a traditional plat and one is a site condominium. we've found that using the site condominium is far superior to a plat when it comes to common elements such as open space, or there's going to be other jointly owned items that have to be maintained by somebody other than the municipality. So in this case, site condominium is appropriate for us because there's going to be a common space, open space, not only that large area on the western portion of the property, but also the stormwater ponds are going to be under private ownership. So that's the primary reason. The approval process through the state of Michigan it skips a step. It doesn't require a bunch of signatures, and it's more efficient in that way as well. But from a look and an appearance, a site condominium is going to look just like a traditional plat. Those homes, you're going to drive through it, it's going to look just like Prairie Run neighborhood to the south.
And in fact, Ms. Powell, I believe the most recent neighborhood addition there, the Prairie Run North addition, is also a site condominium neighborhood.
There was one group, I believe the last edition on the Prairie Run started off as a site condominium, but then came to us asking to be platted. Is there any chance that that might be happening? And if there is there any issue with, is there any reason that we couldn't change it if they want it changed?
I don't know if you want me to respond to that, Mr. Womack, but our intention is a site condominium. With the common space and the common elements, we're going to have to develop it in that form. So to plat it after the fact, it would just be a mess.
And not only that, but the most recent edition doesn't really have a lot of open space. I don't think there's any real good reason for them to maintain a HOA to pay for anything either. Whereas this new development is going to have, or at least as proposed, a nature area, a walking trail, and some stormwater basins. So they will need that kind of stronger HOA involved. So it makes sense for this development.
Okay, I don't have an objection. I just remember that being a piece where it had started off as a site condominium. And then it came to us with we've decided we'd like to plat it. And so just to clarify, as long as there is this community aspect regarding the nature preserve and the stormwater structures, it really can't be platted.
It can be, but it's a logistical nightmare after the fact.
And again, I don't need it to be. I want to know, in the event that I get asked this question later, what are my options? Because when we did this before, there wasn't a POD attached to it. And we were told previously it was absolutely going to be a site condominium. And then it was absolutely needed to be platted.
I'm sorry, I don't have the background information on that development. I'm relatively new here with Westview Capital. But I can assure you, we already have the master deed prepared and the bylaws and the homeowners association structure in order. So it is our intention to go through with the site condominium form of ownership. And again, that's going to look and feel just like a traditional plat. You know, the people are going to not only own the home, but they're going to own the lot or the unit that they're on. So from an appearance standpoint, it's going to look the same. It's just for the maintenance issues of the common elements, including that nature park on the west end and the stormwater basins.
Yeah, and again, I don't have an objection. We did it previously, there wasn't a PUD involved. And I want to know, if I'm voting on this PUD, that we're all clear about what that limits in the event that you come in the future and want something different.
If I could jump in for a second, I believe Ms. Atchison is the phone number that's just arrived, 6459. I'll ask her to unmute and identify herself. Ms. Atchison, can you hear us? And if so, can you unmute yourself and be identified? I apologize that she's there, but she's not unmuting herself. So Okay, so Mr. West, one of the main concerns that the planning commission worked through was the side setbacks. And I think you did an excellent job kind of showing the planning commission members with the average width of the lots and the models that you have. And you had an infographic that showed that. Do you have that spooled up that you could share that today?
Yes, I do, Mr. Womack. If you can I just load it up, or do you have to give me control?
There you go. There you go. You
Okay.
can.
Let me get the right one up here.
Okay.
Well, as I scroll through these real quickly, just for council, this is our proposal. This is an alternative R1C plan, which would involve a cul-de-sac bulb into that nature area. That would be what would be allowed under.
Mr. West, I'm sorry. There's nothing being shared yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you see anything now?
Not yet.
Let me try this again here. Let me go back out.
Mike, I am on here, if you can hear me.
Yep, there you go. Thank you, Lisa.
Yep.
And Madam Clerk, would you mark that she is now present, please? All right,
Yes.
Mr. West, we can see it now.
All right, thank you. Again, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this is our proposal. I know you have a lot of this material in your agenda packets. This is our proposal under the PD. So we're basically bringing a Pioneer Trail here, stopping it here, and then bringing a street back out to Cedar Springs Avenue. This was an alternative plan that we looked at under the existing R1, and to get the similar number of lots, it would have had pretty much the same street design. Everything, Prairie or Pioneer Trail would come up this road. This is all the same. It just would involve this cul-de-sac end here, which we really didn't want to do. We feel that open space is more of an amenity. But in order to get from this to this and keep the same number of lots, we did have to do a reduction in our lot widths, which we do all over the state. So I think this is what Mr. Womack is referring to. I kind of showed this to the Planning Commission because what we're asking for was 6-foot side yard setbacks on these slightly narrower lots, which is consistent with what the minimum requirements are on the Prairie Run development to the south because it's zoned R2. But there was a little concern that we were going to have homes 6 foot apart, on either side. So 12 foot between all homes. And that is not what we need the 6 foot setbacks for, really. We need it for flexibility. Now, what I'm showing here is these would be 58-foot wide lots. So these 6 different scenarios are on a 58-foot wide lot. That is the narrowest lot we have in the subdivision. There's several other ones that are in the 60s and 70s, but this represents several of the lots along the north side of Larchwood Avenue that we're showing on the preliminary site condo. Different floor plans. You can see some of them. I think this one right here, this Integrity 18630 is the plan that occupies the most of that lot. This one, this building, I should go back here. This dashed line represents a building envelope per the setbacks. 6 foot on the sides, 40 on the rear, 30 on the front. This floor plan would take all of that 6 foot up. It would go 6 foot to 6 foot. That's just one plan. We have dozens and dozens of plans that can be altered or semi-customized by the homeowner as part of the purchase process. But most of these plans have flexibility. Like this Integrity series has a 9 and a 9. This one actually exceeds the 10-foot setback. It's one of our smaller units by level. So what I think we came to a compromise for at the Planning Commission, at least their recommendation, what they were comfortable with. We originally were proposing 6 and 6 on the side. If we could have one side be 6 feet on the setback and then the other side be 9, I think we can fit almost all the product that we're hoping to offer in this community on those lots. So instead of 6 and 6 on the sides, if we could have 6 and 9 with some flexibility on which side to put it based on what homes are on either side of it, we could still make that development plan work. I don't know if anybody has any.
Thank you, Mr. West. That I appreciate that. The visualization, I think, helps the both Planning Commission and City Council members understand kind of what we talked about.
Any further questions on to Mr. West?
One of the comments that was made at Planning Commission was, one of the plant commissioners was worried that people could not store their motorhome, their RVs, boats, so forth next to their homes. And the fact of the matter is the rules for your homeowner association does not allow it at all. So that should not be a problem. You can put it in your driveway to unload, offload, short periods of time, but you can't leave them in your yard.
Yeah,
So that should,
Ms. Powell, so this is kind of where we get the intersection between what the HOA might permit or not permit and what the city enforces or doesn't enforce. So
right.
currently on the city's ordinances, we do not allow any motorhome, any boat, any trailer, anything to be stored in the front yard. The front yard being the facade of your house to the street. However,
Right.
every day of the week, if you drive up and down the streets in Cedar, you will see that people have their boats and their RVs and their utility trailers and stuff. Now they parked in the front yard, but literally on the grass in the front yard. And it is something we have chosen not to enforce while we kind of sort out our rules, because this board, along with the Planning Commission, has, in my opinion, taken a much softer approach towards what the rules currently say. And that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. It's to the benefit of the citizens. However, currently we just simply don't enforce anything. And I think that's how you get to look junky. I think that's how you have, 7 cars up on blocks in your front lawn. It doesn't present a good neighborhood look. And people don't want to buy a house in your neighborhood if the neighbor has 6 cars on blocks in the front yard. So I anticipate here in the next year or two, we will rewrite our ordinances that will give more permissions, but also actually be enforced. Now, the reason I'm even discussing all this is because, yes, the HOA that will be in place will have a rule, I'm sure, that says you can't park these things in your front yard. But HOAs are very hesitant to enforce their rules sometimes because that makes them the bad guy. And if you are enforcing your rules against the people who live in your neighborhood, you can make enemies. So sometimes it happens that they won't enforce their own rules, and instead the city is forced to be the bad guy and enforce the city's rules. So one of the things that we had talked about as the Planning Commission and internally, of course, is if we allow a neighborhood like this to come in and have 6-foot side setbacks, I know that at least one board member has a boat that is 7 feet wide. So if you've got a 7-foot wide boat and a 6-foot side setback, you're not going to be able to put your boat on the side of your house. And so you will then be forced to put that in your front yard, and then the city has to be the bad guy, right?
I thought that was what homeowner associations were supposed to enforce.
Supposed to, I think, is being the key word there. And in some communities, they do. In some communities, they go the opposite direction, and they say if your grass is half an inch taller than it's supposed to be, they're going to impound your house and put a lien on it and all that crazy stuff. We don't want that either. But we're just trying to anticipate what's going to happen here in the next couple of years. This is a rural community. This is a farming community, and people sure do like their boats and trailers and campers. And that's fine, but we need to anticipate where they're going to store them and try to have houses that have side yards that can at least accommodate that to a certain extent, which is why I think Mr. Johnson, the city planner, Mr. West, and the Planning Commission came up with a reasonable solution. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a reasonable solution. And that is what Mr. West was just indicating, which is the 6-foot side setback on some sides, 9 foot on the other side, so that there should at least be one 9-foot side setback on most homes. That should be enough to accommodate that type of thing. So I'm sure it's not going to be perfect. I'm sure we'll still have issues, but we're at least heading off what I anticipate would be a major problem in a 108 home neighborhood. So that all being said, the only other thing I would add is, Mr. West, did you guys come up with a new name for Burning Bush Court yet?
I have delegated that to one of our engineers, and he's gonna change that for you.
Yeah, I've never understood how neighborhoods come up with the names for their streets. But I didn't like that one. Maybe the city council has other opinions, but I did ask for that name to be changed.
Okay, the planning commission has referred this to us for approval. They've made changes. What's the will of the council?
Mr. Hall, I would ask that we table this until next month, give the board enough time to review it, ask questions, and if so, if I anticipate, Mr. West, that there might be additional questions or any concerns about passage, I'd invite you back next month. But Mr. Hall, I would ask that we table this at this time.
Okay, what's the will of the council?
Should I make a motion?
This issue until next month's meeting.
Second.
What was the motion, Ms. Powell?
I think Mrs. Nixon made a motion. I didn't hear all of it though.
Mrs. Nixon made the motion, and it was to table this until next month. And
Okay.
I seconded it.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Conley, Mrs. Nixon. Any further discussion? Hearing none. I would say any questions or concerns on this for next month, you should direct them to Mr. Womack to get your answers. Have a roll call vote. Mrs. Atchison. Is she still here? I don't see her. Mrs. Conley.
Don't see her.
Yes.
Mrs. Nixon.
Yes.
Mrs. Powell.
Yes.
Mrs. Race.
Yes.
Mr. Hall votes yes. Motion carries. Table to next month. Any questions or concerns, you need to refer them to Mr. Womack to get your resolve for next month. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. West.
Thank you.
Item E, Mr. Womack. Madam Clerk.
Yep, so just give me 1 second. So this is the added discussion item of the recreational marijuana regulatory ordinance. So unfortunately, this was a last-second addition, even for me. I'm just going to try to bring it up here if I can. Okay, so let me share my screen at least, because I didn't even get a chance to email this to you folks.
Nothing yet. There you go.
So are you seeing some red text there? Okay. So essentially, here's what's going on. You know, I believe in free enterprise. I believe in capitalism. We had lots of discussions about marijuana businesses potentially coming in and looks like Miss Atchison is back. There we go. Marijuana businesses coming in and fixing up old buildings, and you know, after a couple of years, they'll go out of business if they don't succeed, and everything will be peachy keen. However, and I will openly admit this, I believe I was wrong about the amount of money and interest that we would have invested into this community. And I am staring at the possibility of having 4 or 5 marijuana retail stores downtown, including 4 on one block. So even I think that's a bit too much. And of course, we had a very, very liberal ordinance that we passed, which, you know, is good in some respects, but I put together this ordinance just for the council to consider. And so this is the regulatory side of it. You can kind of see the language there. I don't know if it's big enough for you to read, but what's essentially doing is establishing a 100-foot separation distance between all marijuana establishments from each other, unless they are co-located on the same piece of property. It's an incredibly mild addition. It should not affect any open marijuana applications because we don't have any right now. We have had 3 applications come through. The Planning Commission has given preliminary approval to all 3 of them at this point. And right now we have no applications open. So now seems to be an appropriate time to consider and maybe adopt this. I'll stop sharing this one. Obviously, I'll email this all to you immediately after the meeting, now that I have it done. Let me add the other one.
Okay, Mr. Womack, we would consider this as first reading.
Yep, I would ask that you consider this as first reading, but let me just put the other one up on the screen. So all the language that change is going to be in red. So this one's a lot simpler. You can see right here, cannot be located within 100 feet of any other pre-existing marijuana establishment except those marijuana establishments co-located on the same real property. Distance is measured from property line to property line. So the language is fairly simple. I will have the city attorney look at this as soon as tomorrow. But the bigger question isn't so much whether we should do this or not. Obviously, council will have their decision to make on that, but how we want to approach the intervening time. So, you know, there's a lot of money, lots of people looking to open up and establish. So the sooner we get it done, the better. So that nobody's caught unawares, nobody's trying to buy property and start a business without the ability to actually open due to this change in the law. So we could set a special meeting to do this. We could wait until our November meeting to do this, and the zoning side of it does have to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So that one will take a minimum until the November meeting, but the regulatory one could be done at any time if we wanted to set a special meeting. Now, here's another option, and that is we can wait until the November meeting, and in the meanwhile, place a moratorium on accepting applications. So we don't have any applications open right now. I did remove all the application materials from the city's website today, so that theoretically they can't access them through the city's website. And we could simply say, hey, if the city council is thinking about changing a minor aspect of it, we don't want you to get caught in a position where you can't open your store. So we're not going to accept applications until the city council either adopts or chooses not to adopt this change. So I guess I would like discussion from the city council on this first reading of how they'd like to proceed. I'm open to any questions you might have.
I have a question.
Question, Ms. Nixon. Any questions from the council?
I believe Ms. Nixon indicated she had a question and then she muted herself.
I thought he said Mrs. Atchison, so I was waiting. My question is, you said that you were seeing that 4 of these businesses may all be on the same block. Is that something that these owners have already purchased the property, or they're thinking about purchasing the property?
So of course, I can't imagine in any real estate decision purchasing a property prior to getting their approval. Usually what happens in these types of commercial deals is that they will put together a purchase agreement whereby they'll have basically an option on the property while they go through the zoning process, so that when and once they get the approval through the city planning commission is when they actually effectuate the purchase of the property. Really what's going on is we've got a couple that, you know, have gone through the process. We've got rumors of people who are looking to sell. I know at least one deal fell through, that they were working on the sale. And of course, part of this is we advertise what we're thinking about doing. And we provide them with the opportunity to come and say, hey, you can't do that. I've already purchased the property or whatever. We could grandfather in somebody who's already made a purchase or something to that effect. But at this point, I'm not aware of anybody that this would really truly negatively affect currently. There are some people who have speculative investment, where they have either purchased property and intend to do that, or they might have, thought about purchasing a property, and this would frustrate their ability to purchase that property. But we have no open applications, and there's nobody in the process.
Mike, is it fair to close down the application or moratorium on the application process if there's folks out there that want to apply?
Is it fair? I mean, that's an interesting question. Fair to who? I guess would be a first question. And second of all, at some point, I don't care, because we're talking about people who are trying to make money versus the city looking out for the long-term benefits of the community. So is it unfair? Possibly, maybe, depending on your definition. But at some point, if you've got businesses who are attempting to make money versus the rights of the citizens of Cedar Springs and the long-term interests of the citizens of Cedar Springs, I know which way I'm going to fall down on.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So
Go ahead.
how much, I guess, respectively, we're going from only a certain number could really be in the city anyway. We looked at this before, based upon the state requirements of being a certain distance from a church and a certain distance from a school and a certain, how many less does this allow? Do we have an idea?
Sure. So first of all, there is no state requirement that there be a separation from a church. The only separation distance is from schools, and that's 1,000 feet. So that's part of the reason.
Is it 1,000 daycares?
No, there's no separation
No?
distance from daycares
Okay.
either.
Maybe I'm thinking of the alcohol licensing.
That is in the alcohol licensing, yes. So that's part of it. Is we were extremely liberal in how we wrote this ordinance and discussed it. And I think we did that with the anticipation that there would be reasonableness in the business community. Well, and I don't mean to be mean-spirited when I say it, but there's a lot of money to be had in marijuana, and there's a lot of money to be had in speculative real estate development. And I just think, unfortunately, maybe we swing too far towards the liberal side on this one, and maybe now's the time to just inch it back just a little bit and say, we don't need every single storefront on Main Street to be a marijuana business. Having 3 or 4, even in the downtown area, it could be reasonable. But having 3 or 4 that are with next door to each other, I think gives off the wrong impression. And I think you kind of make it go to the lowest common denominator at that point, that you're no longer having 1 or 2 really high quality businesses, but you're having anybody with a hope and a dream trying to open up a store. So this is just an option for council to consider. I was asked to bring it to the board, and I guess we'll do whatever council wants.
Yeah, my comment would be that, just guessing off the top of my head, we could have 12 to 15 dispensary stores right there in a 2-block district. So that's my thoughts. I think we should push this ordinance through, or put it in place, so we can at least control how many dispensary stores we have right in the downtown area. That's my thoughts. Any questions or concerns any further from the fellow councilors?
I agree.
I'd like to
Agree
make a,
with- Go ahead, Ms. Dixon.
I'd like to make a motion to in place a moratorium on all marijuana applications for the city of Cedar Springs pending the resolution of consideration of the proposed ordinance.
Okay, is there a second to Miss Nixon's?
I'll
motion?
second that.
Mrs. Conley. Madam Clerk, did you get that motion?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Womack, do you understand that? Did you get that motion?
I did, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion before I call a roll call vote?
I can't support that motion until I've actually read the new rules. You know, it's just all too new to me. I understand the basics of it, but I haven't even read it yet.
Motion is to put a moratorium on the applications until we can look at the rules.
So we can look at this ordinance to amend.
All right, I get that. Okay.
Understand? Is Miss Atchison still on? All right. Any further questions before I call a roll call vote?
Do we know when we're going to get this studied? Are we going to get a special meeting or what?
Ms. Powell, I'm going to print out some copies for the board members who are present here right now to take home with them. I can bring some copies out to the dog park build out tomorrow for anybody who might want to have them. And of course, I'll email them to you tonight as well. My only concern is, of course, I put this together in about 2 hours time today. And I'm sure the language will be changed a little bit when the city attorney gets a hold of it. But the intent should be the same, and that is simply to prohibit any marijuana establishment from establishing a new marijuana business within 100 feet of a pre-existing marijuana business, unless they're co-located. So that's
and that would cover the whole city, not just downtown.
Correct.
This motion.
Okay.
Right. Okay. I'm going to call the roll vote. Any other questions? This is a vote on Mrs. Nixon's motion. Mrs. Conley,
Yes.
Mrs. Nixon,
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Ms. Race,
Yes.
Mr. Hall votes yes, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on then to, I believe, item F. Mr. Womack?
Yep, sorry, thank you. I was just trying to print these out so they're on the printer. So same idea, and I actually did discuss this previously. So this is just the second of the two ordinances that we have in the community that address marijuana. It's the, I guess, simpler of the two. It simply just says you can't have a marijuana business within 100 feet of another one. The more complicated language will be on the regulatory side. Which I spent probably an hour and 45 minutes working on the language. So with the previous motion by Ms. Nixon, I don't know if there's any more else we have to do. So I would just simply ask that the board do a first reading and we'll deal with it soon enough.
Thank you. Then moving on then to item G.
Thank you.
The planning commission. Go ahead, Mr. Womack.
So again, I'll reiterate and thank the Planning Commission. They've done an excellent job here recently. They put a lot of hard work into it. And I know that several of the members were not comfortable with the whole marijuana thing to begin with. They did try to stick it out as long as they could. But unfortunately, we did lose 2 members who did not feel comfortable approving of marijuana businesses. So I thank them for their service. And they were on the board for many years and did a great job for us. We then also lost a member because they moved out of the community. He was also a very good, hardworking member of the board. And of course, the city council does have the ability and authority to allow non-citizens to serve on that board. But it wasn't but 2 or 3 years ago that we did address that previously, and the board decided at that time not to allow it. And then just at the end of the meeting, I received an email from one of the other members who indicated that he had accepted a new job and that it was a night-hour job, and he did not think he would be able to attend meetings due to a job conflict. So our 9-member board appears to be down to 5 members at this point. Obviously, that's not great. It does cause us some problems. And so I wanted to, at the very minimum, discuss these matters with the council and kind of get some direction. So there's a couple things we could do, one of which is allow non-citizens to serve on our board. A second would be to reduce the total number of persons who serve on the board from 9 to 7 or 9 to 5. And thirdly, we could consider paying members of the Planning Commission a stipend for their service on the board. Something in the range of $20 to $50 per meeting that they attend. So I'm open to any thoughts, questions, concerns that you might have, and I would like some direction because I would probably bring back a draft ordinance to your next meeting.
Okay, let's start with item 1. I'd have a straw vote amongst the counselors to allow non-city residents to be appointed to the board.
Mr. Hall.
Mrs. Conley, you say no?
Nope, I'm a definite no on that. I can
Okay.
explain why if you want.
No, that's fine. I agree. Mrs. Nixon?
No.
No. Okay, we have Mrs. Powell.
When you say non-citizens, do you mean the city
Non-resident.
property? Okay,
Non-city residents.
all right. No.
Okay, thank you. I agree. Mrs. Race?
No.
I also say no. So that's, I feel that we should have people that are residents on the planning commission to direct the growth and guide the city in the future. Item number 2, Mr. Womack, what was that?
So both the Planning Commission and the City Council had previously discussed this. This is 2 or 3 years ago now. That even at that time, having 9 members was difficult to fill. It's a small community. As you guys know, we have lots of family members serving on 2 different boards. We've got the same couple of people serving on multiple boards. And I appreciate that, and that's great. But at some point, it becomes a little unwieldy to have to try to fill boards with warm bodies. And maybe it's time to constrict the number of members on that board from 9 to 7 or 9 to 5. Of course, having more members, I think, brings more perspective to the board and opens it up to having, new perspectives and interesting people join the boards. On the other hand, it can also cause problems where you might have a difficult time getting a quorum and some other issues. So I guess I would ask whether the board thinks it's appropriate to pursue restricting or constricting the number from 9 to 7 or 9 to 5. I guess 3 or 1 would be it.
Mr. Mayor, may I comment on this?
Mrs. Nixon or Mrs. Race, go ahead.
Just real quick, if we decide to change it to a different number, 5, 7, whatever, can we change it back at some point, or has it been 9 for a long time and this is the first time we're going down?
So we had previously discussed doing it and decided not to do it at that time. This was in the last year or 2. I don't believe that we've ever changed it. Now the Planning Commission is a body of ordinance. So, the City Council at some point passed an ordinance, I'm trying to bring it up here, which created the Planning Commission. Now, obviously, if the Planning Commission did not exist, the City Council would end up being the Planning Commission and taking on all of their work. So obviously there is a benefit to having a planning commission. Yeah, I don't see a date in which it was looks like 1982 and then possibly 1982.
Sounds right.
Yeah, a lot of our
Sounds right.
stuff started in 1982. It's possible that it was around before that, but that's the earliest I can see in these records. And nothing appears to have changed since then.
Oh, is what Mrs. Conley, I believe you're next, or sorry, Mrs. Race, are you complete? You satisfied? Okay, thank you. Mrs. Conley.
I've sat on quite a few different boards. I was on the school board and I was on the library board. I've been part of the garden club, and I don't know of any other board that has 9 members. 9 is a lot. It feels kind of unwieldy to me, even trying to just get everybody in the room and have everybody's voice be heard. I've always thought it should be down to 7 or 5. And I know when they were struggling to get enough seats previously, this conversation was had by the Planning Commission, and they liked the idea of having more voices. And I don't think that's inherently bad, but they've been struggling to fill those seats for quite a while. What I would like to see is have them go down to 5, because they are an advisory board to our board, which is 7. And then if there is a strong desire to have greater voice, if there's people that are feeling really compelled, or if the Planning Commission feels like they need more opening positions, then we could move them back to 7. But at the moment, I would like to see them go down to 5. And I don't know of another board, including those of us who are elected, that are over 7.
Okay, thank you. I agree then. I think is what you're saying, you're starting the initiative to reduce it to 5, Mrs. Conley? The rest of the counselors, what's your opinion on that? Mrs. Nixon, we haven't heard from you.
Not opposed to reducing the board to 5 or 7. And if a stipend will help, I'm not necessarily opposed to that either. However, full disclosure, my husband is on the Planning Commission.
Yes.
So by proxy, I would benefit from whatever stipend would be decided upon.
Yeah, that's our next question. So are you encouraging to go down to 5?
I would be okay with 5.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Race, what's your opinion?
I agree. 5 is good.
Mrs. Powell?
I'm kind of mixed between 7 and 5, because if you have 7, quite often you'll have 2 or 3 that can't be there. And that's going to be kind of a sticky wicket, but 7 or 5 is okay. We're just going to have to be careful of absentees and people quitting.
Yes, if we have less than 5, we don't have a quorum, so then they wouldn't be able to post it. But I have been on the Planning Commission also for several years, and as being the mayor, it's hard to get people engaged to be on the Planning Commission. We're constantly trying to get people on there, and to be honest, everybody's happy with what's going on and they don't want to be on it. So I guess we could reduce it to 5, and then in the future, if it doesn't work out well, then we can move it up to 7 by motion. Again, we have to go through the, I believe, 60-day noticing to do that.
Unfortunately, it is an ordinance, so it would have to be passed by ordinance again, which obviously makes it complicated. So the only real downside, and Ms. Conley, I don't disagree with you, having a smaller, maybe more nimble board could make things easier. The only real downside to having a 5-person board is that a quorum is 3. In a quorum of 3, 2 is a majority, and you could have things being passed by a 2-person majority in the community.
Yes.
That can be dangerous.
Agreed. Very true. That is, I've always been of the notion that 9 people is better. The more voices we hear are better. But if we can't get anybody to serve on the boards, what do we do? So,
So I
what's the
guess I would
will of the
only,
council?
sorry, I would only ask that the board maybe consider 7 people as an option. I'll put together an ordinance with language to change it. But maybe kind of think through the math between now and the next meeting about what a quorum would be, what a majority that would be. And just think about it. I'll bring back language that could change it for the next meeting. But option 3, stipends. As Ms. Nixon was indicating, there are several members of this board who have family members who serve on the planning commission board, which is normal in a small community. But that could also put us into the awkward position of half of this board having to abstain to vote on that measure because of the potential financial gains that would be had by the family of this board having their spouse serve on the planning commission. So that being said, I believe I worked out that if we had a stipend of $50 per meeting at 9 members, that it would cost about $5,000 per year. So that's $50 times 9, which is $450 times 12. Let me get on my handy calculator here.
Yeah, I would
12,
think,
so that's $5,400, assuming that we had all 12 meetings and all 9 members showed up each time. $5,000 at the end of the day is a minuscule amount. I believe we had $1,000 or $2,000 in the budget this year simply for training seminars. So I don't see a stipend as an issue. We could easily budget for it, but you know, it's also a philosophical issue of should we be paying people or should they be serving because they just simply want to look out for the best of the community? So I'll leave that to the council to decide.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
may I comment on this?
Yes, Ms. Conley, go ahead.
And I also have a family member. My husband is currently the chair of this board. He was the vice chair before the chair resigned. And so I am in the same place that Mrs. Nixon is, and the mayor also serves on this. But I'm going to go to my having served on quite a few different boards. And at one point I was on the school board and we were not paid. And it's a lot of time to put in for what actually costs you money. By the time you print copies of the agendas, by the time you drive to look at locations, by the time you drive to meetings, it actually costs you money. And while we are doing community service, it would be nice to break even, to have it at least not cost you anything. And I think there's something too to be said that the Planning Commission has been doing a lot of heavy lifting. They have been looking at site plans, and there's a skill set that comes with learning how to do this and getting this training that on some level we should compensate them by saying, you know, we understand that your time has value. And at least we're going to do is have this not cost you money. And a minimal compensation would be one way to make that happen. So that it also acknowledges that we're saying, hey, this is a valuable service that you provide for your community.
Yes, I agree. I'll take the initiative here. Seeing as how there's 2 of the board members not here and there's 3 of us here that would be affected by that, I would ask that we table the payment portion until such time we have a full quorum on the council present. But I'm thinking let's go with the 7 members of the Planning Commission. If Mr. Womack, you would write us a ordinance for next month.
I'd be happy to start working on that.
With 7 members and bring that back next month, and hopefully we can have a quorum, a full council present to discuss the payment issue, and if you would put together a sheet to show us what it would run for 7 members compensation. That'd be all right?
Yep, thank
The
you.
rest of the council, you agree? Hearing no further rebuttals. Any other comments or concerns before we move on? Hearing none. Is there any other business to be brought before us at this time on discussion, Mr. Womack?
I don't believe so. No, thank you.
Okay, I think we've cleared it. In this portion of the agenda, we're moving on to item 6, communications. Mr. Womack, the Green Family Pumpkin Giveaway Event.
Thank you. So the Green family has done this pumpkin giveaway event for, I think, 7 or 8 years now here in the community. They were doing it in Morley Park. They've moved around a little bit recently. Due to the COVID, they've decided to do more of a drive-through pumpkin giveaway event this year. And because of the anticipation and reduced participation with trick-or-treating and candy passing out, I believe they are going to have a component of their drive-through pumpkin giveaway that's giving kids candy. So I attached their little flyer there. You can take a look at it. I'm sure they will be happy to accept any kind of financial or candy donations that you can give to them. I then also added the fire station progress report. If you have not driven or walked past there recently, I encourage you to do so. 2 days ago, it was a lot of concrete in the mud, and today there's like a roof over the structure. It's actually been quite a lot of fun to watch in the last couple of days. So things are looking good. Hopefully it'll be winterized well before winter, and they'll work on it throughout the winter.
Thank you. Yes, it's great to see some steel being going up. It's starting to take shape to see what we have. So one and all, that's a good idea to drive by and take a look. It is kind of muddy, but it is really taking shape now. Any questions or concerns on communications? Hearing none, moving on to item 10, department reports.
Thank you. Obviously, the big thing for me tomorrow and the next day, besides the amazing weather we're going to have, and please, 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 everybody get out and enjoy it, because I don't know how much more we'll have this year, is tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I've got a number of you who should be joining me at Riddle Park for the installation of the first part of the dog park. The mayor and I were out there for about 2 hours today, and Miss Race came out to help as well for a little bit. So we've got a lot of the lines already set, lots of spray paint down on the ground. Tomorrow we'll be digging holes, filling it with concrete, mixing water in there, and making sure everything is straight. I believe we have to make the concrete dry overnight through Saturday morning. And then Saturday we can put it on top rail and the fabric, the gates, and we should have a substantially completed dog park by Saturday early afternoon. I would then like to, maybe a week or two after that, have a bit of a ribbon cutting grand opening. Of course, if the gates are on, they should be able to use it in the meanwhile, but it'd be nice to have a little ribbon cutting for that. And then the only other thing I want to mention right now is the DDA has funded a, I guess, straw bale decorating movement throughout the community. So the DPW did an amazing job getting, I believe, something like 80 straw bales put out on Main Street and 17 Mile Road. Yeah, the businesses who want to participate. We did unfortunately have to turn down 1 or 2 additions today. The DDA overshot their budget a bit. Very wildly popular when you give things away for free, I guess. And so we should start seeing people decorating those here in the next couple of days, and those should be out for the next month or so. And I would like to also personally thank Vanderhyde Ford, who also donated some money to it. So the DDA and Vanderhyde Ford are primarily responsible for it, and the code enforcement officer, she made quite a lot of phone calls. So I'd like to thank all those people. Thank you.
Any questions of the city manager and his report? Hearing none, moving on to department reports. Department of Public Works. Any questions or concerns of the DPW? And infrastructure alternative. Make note that on November 13th at noon, there will be a tour through the wastewater plant of our recent upgrades and maintenance and expenditures. Mr. Osborne is very proud of that place out there, and he keeps it very nice. So if you can make it, please do. Item C, Police Department. Sergeant Probst is with us this evening, I think.
I'm here.
Any questions or concerns to Sergeant Probst? Hearing none. Thank you, Sergeant Probst. Chief Frazier.
May I just ask Sergeant Probst a question?
Sure.
So, Sergeant Probst, everything okay as far as people wearing masks and not giving our police folks difficulties with that?
No, the public has been doing really well. They've been wearing masks around us, and we haven't been having very many complaints at all in town. Things are going well.
Wonderful. And your people are all safe and well?
Yes, for the most part. We have occasional things going on at the sheriff's department at the main office, but for the most part, everyone's doing great.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions of Sergeant Probst? Moving on to D, Chief Frazier. Any questions or concerns or to Chief Frazier on the fire department? His report was very thorough. Thank you, Chief.
Just to throw out a quick comment, thank you to the council for letting us buy some new equipment. You know, I don't come to you unless I absolutely need it. And I think before one of these pieces of equipment fail, we'll be proactive instead of reactive. And again, thank you to the council.
Christmas is coming early for you maybe this year, Chief, for the
Yes.
fire burn. Thank you. Any questions of Chief Frazier? Moving on to our city clerk. She is present this evening. Any questions or concerns to Mrs. Johnson?
Welcome back, Rebecca.
Thank you. I have been back 1 week and it's been a busy week, and I just wanted to thank Chandel for doing a lot of the heavy lifting during the election for August, and the other staff members, Mike, Darla, Carrie, Deb. They've all done a great job of picking up some of those extra responsibilities in my absence, so I just wanted to thank them.
Thank you. Good luck for your sleep deprivation. Moving on then to Finance Director, Mrs. Falcon. Any questions of our Finance Director? Very good presentation from our auditors. Things are looking good.
Mr. Mayor, may I back up and ask the clerk a question for the benefit of the community?
You're too late, but go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, I've had a few people ask me, they can come in and get or call and get an absentee ballot still right now, correct?
Correct. Yes, they can still do that.
So a person can call, say, I want to pick up an absentee ballot, and come in and pick it up later that day and then drop it back off at City Hall, yes?
They can do that. They do need to fill out the absent voter application for the ballot, but yes.
Okay, where would they find that voter absent ballot application?
At City
You can
Hall.
fill it out online, and we also have copies here at City Hall.
Okay, so you can fill it out at City Hall, get an absentee ballot, come home, fill it out, drop it back off. Or you can you can print it at home, fill it out, and drop it off when you pick up your absentee ballot, the application?
Correct. Correct. You can also fill it out online entirely. And if you go to the Secretary of State's website, there should be additional information on filling that out online.
All right, because I know there's some people who are concerned about being able to get it mailed in time.
Yep, you always have the option to put it in the Dropbox or deliver it hand to one of us here in the office. So
Okay,
if they are concerned about mailing issues or timing issues, they can always come in and pick it up, or if they want it mailed out, they can have it mailed out and then drop it back off to us in person or using the Dropbox.
do they need to call ahead regarding the application for getting the absentee ballot if they want to do it in the office?
They do not need to call ahead. Generally, Chandel or I are available throughout the day, all day. There may be a rare occurrence where one of us is absent, but it would be a very short-lived absence.
Okay, I fielded a lot of questions about this in the last little bit, so I wanted to make sure that I had that clarified, and then it will live on YouTube. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Also, can folks vote when they pick up that ballot? Vote here and give it back to you?
Yes.
Yes, they can do that.
All right. Okay, any other questions? We'll move on to the finance director, treasurer's report. Any questions or concern to Ms. Falcon? Hearing none. Moving on, code enforcement, building inspections, and boards and commissions. At this time of the evening, we have council comments. Mrs. Atchison, are you available? Or is she not? She's not on. Okay, moving on then. Mrs. Conley.
Thank you for all of the people who keep making this work while we're in this crazy time of dealing with the virus. And the next time that we meet, there will have been an election. So thank you for making that happen. That's our absolute primary responsibility as a council, is to make sure that our citizens have the right to vote. So thank you to all of the folks, to Rebecca, but then to everybody that's making that happen. So that's people have the right and the ability to exercise that right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Nixon. Do you have any comments, closing comments?
So best of luck to city staff with the upcoming election. I'm sure you'll knock it out of the park, as you frequently do, but it doesn't make it any less arduous, and I appreciate the effort you put into it.
Thank you. Mrs. Powell.
I always thought this was going to be an exciting election. And as you may or may not know, Jerry Gross and I are both up for election running unopposed. So all I can hope for is to get 4 more years, God willing, and serve our city another 4 years. And I'd be very grateful and honored to do so. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Mrs. Race.
I think my hardest decision for this election is going to be voting for you, Powell.
Don't vote for me.
Don't vote for me. So just wanted to say thank you. I know that I sat through most of the planning commission meeting on Tuesday night. It was a very long meeting. I forget how much work that is. And I really want to thank everyone for taking their time out of their day to get the city straight. So I appreciate that. And I will see everyone tomorrow as we build our fence for the doggies.
Yes, thank you. I too, on the planning commission, it shapes the growth and the direction of our community for years to come with our ordinances and everything. And it's a hard sometimes to come to an agreement, agree to disagree, but we always move on and do the best we can, the planning commission, and try to make things the best that we can for the community. So as the person that has to appoint those people, it's very hard to find people that will engage in the planning commission. They're too busy or they're not interested. And that tells me that they are happy with the direction the community's going, which is a good thing. But to get people engaged, it's really hard. And if we do decide to reduce to 7 or 5, that's what we will go with. And I want to thank the staff and everything for everything they do. We say this every month, but we truly believe it, that without them, this city would not operate the way it is now. So thank you one and all for your part, even on the council. There's a lot of time consuming stuff going on. So Mrs. Powell and Mr. Gross, good luck in your election. Can't wait to see you in November. At this time, we stand adjourned. Yes. Close your
How late are we
Zoom
gonna
out.
be? How late are we gonna be at the dog park tomorrow?
As long as it takes.
Okay, because I have to teach from 9 to 11.
Just come when you can. When you can come, just come on down and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Thank you. I got